Roadman, we have an incredible guest joining us today. He's truly a part of the unique history of cycling. I have the founder of the Power Meter, Uli Schoberer. He founded SRM Power Meters, which were the first power meters. We chat about that initial discovery. How did he figure out that strain gauges were something we needed in cycling? We trace the evolution of power meters and where it can go next. This is a truly inspirational inside story. He gives me tales of working with Mario Cipollini, Greg LeMond, Bjorn Riese, the early adopters of SRM. You're going to love this conversation. Uli, welcome to the Roadman podcast.
Hello, good morning from Germany.
Let me get you to cast your mind at the beginning of this conversation all the way back to what inspired you to even think about measuring power on a bike? Like, why did that seem like a problem that needed solving?
Okay, at that time where I grew up in the 70s and 80s, a lot of guys did on the weekend bike races, mainly criteriums or road races. At that time, there were a lot. And I was always focused at that time to make my training as good as possible. But at that time, maybe you had a little device on the bike that measures the distance, but this was more or less the only thing what you had on the bike when you go back in 1979, 78 and that years. Later, I moved to Jülich to get an engineer in medical engineering. Still did my bike races, get more focused also on the training, studied all the available training books at that time, and I came to the conclusion to make the training more efficient and better, you need to measure your power, your performance. At that time also heart rate monitors got a bit popular by Polar mainly. This was the main company making these heart rate belts. And I think, okay, if you have the heart rate and the power, then it should be possible to optimize the training.
So, Uli, what was the problem you were trying to solve? So the power meter has become so much now. It's a peer comparison tool. It's a training instrument. It's, so much to us.
The problem to solve is, I was at that time, you could go 2-3 times a year to the doctor, 4 times. In the laboratory, you make a step test on an ergometer, measuring lactate, threshold, things like this. This was existent. Then, this is only one shot at one day. But what you need is for the training a permanently record of your performance. And this you can only do when you have a device on your bike that measures your power. Because this was clear for me, because when you do other sports like swimming, you are always on the timing or running. Or even if you are running, you know the timing, what you are doing for the certain speed.
Yeah.
On a bike, this does not exist. On the bike, what's clear for me, you need to measure your power to describe the load you put on your body. This is the only way. You can look also at the heart rate, that's clear. But if you have the power and the heart rate, you can describe how strong a person is and the performance. And you cannot do this only with the heart rate. So you need the power. Because when you are running, you measure your speed of running and your heart rate. You can do this in swimming, you can do this in all sport, but not in cycling. In cycling, you need the power to describe, because the speed does not tell you anything. So the challenge was then, on the bicycle you use outside, how can you measure the power? Because you cannot destroy the energy you produce, because you need this to get forward. So you need to measure the power in a way, not destroying it. And to measure the power means you have to measure 2 values. One value is the pressure on the pedal, the force, because this is the contact person of the cyclist, and then the speed, how fast the pedals are moved forward. Because the pressure on the pedal creates a force on the pedal. Multiplicated with the crank length creates a torque. And this torque is transmitted to the chain and to the rear wheel, and this brings you forward. And then the torque multiplicated with the angular velocity, what's more or less the cadence, describes your power. So you need these 2 values. So how fast you are pedaling and how hard you are pushing the pedals. And then on the bike, you have different points to measure this. The first is you can measure maybe on the pedals, you can measure on the crank, Then you could also measure maybe on the spindle between the left and the right crank, but this would only measure the left side. Then you can measure in the spider, that is the connection point from the crank spindle to the chain rings. Then maybe you can measure on the chain, the vibration of the chain. This is what Polar did at one point. And then the last thing is you can measure on the rear wheel, on the connection point between the sprockets and the rear hub. So you have several points, and then you have to think, okay, what is the best point? The easiest point for the start is to put some strain gauges on the cranks on both sides. Then you have the way to connect this. You can do this with cables, and then you can measure your force on the chain, on the crank. But this is not a good point, because on the crank you have a lot of forces from the pedal in all directions, different torques. The most simple way and the most accurate way at my point is to measure in the spider, because the spider is already free of all the not wanted forces, because on the spider is only transmitted the torque to the chainring and nothing else. Let's say, look, in a mountain bike, you stand on the cranks, you do a descent, you jump on the cranks, you have no force on the spider as long as you're not pedaling. So this is why I came to the point I need to make a power meter that's in the spider. The next thing is that the spider is the first point where left and right crank are connected. So you have already the total torque to the chainring. And then a big advantage of the spider is there's a lot of space, so plenty of space for battery. You can make a robust big electronic, and there's no moving part. It's not like in the pedal you have the bearings. The crank is also very exposed in the crash. The pedal even more exposed for the crash, because the pedal are the first point, contact point when you crash to hit the tarmac. So this is
going on a corner, you could scuff it and stuff as well.
I came to the spider. But to do this, it was maybe a 2-year work to get something working. It was maybe the year 1986, 88. But also,
so was this a full-time job of yours, in the sense that someone goes now to pursue a startup, or was this a side hustle?
No, I was still working I was finished with my study. I'm a medical engineer, and I did this during my study, and this was also my master degree at the end of the study, to make a power meter. But the more challenging was also not only have a power meter, you need a computer, because at that time there was no bike computer existent. Bike computer did not exist. So you have to create a computer on the bike that records the data, because the power meter alone doesn't help you. You need something on the device where you display the information, where you store the information, where you can connect other sensors, like a speed sensor, like a heart rate sensor and others, and record the data. And then the next is you need a software for the computer to analyze the data. So we had to do all three things: make a power meter, make a bike computer, and write the software to analyze the data. And when you go back, this was 1900, maybe 88, 89, nothing of this was existent. And when I get to the first races with my bike computer, everyone was laughing and say, who needs a bike computer? It's the last thing what the cycling world needs. No one wants and needs a bike computer. When you go now to a bike race and look at the guys, there's almost no one without a bike computer. Why?
I started using my first SRM was like 2007, 2008. And I even remember then it would have been a Power Control 5 on my SRM. And people coming to me at the race at the start, like from, Cat 2, Cat 3, and they'd be looking at the computer and going like, why do you need a Game Boy on the front of your bike?
Yes. Yeah.
And it was still bizarre then.
I remember.
So I can only imagine the looks in the 80s.
Very, very long ago, at the start of the first races, I had myself built bike computer on the handlebar, and I remember I hit a pothole. The whole computer fell off the bike. I stopped in the race, put all the parts on the road in my jersey, and came back to the race, and the others were laughing. This is why you don't need a bike computer. And now it's completely different. A lot of guys now, they say, I cannot ride my bike anymore if I don't have my bike computer. They want this feedback. So they get more or less then also, I would say, somehow a slave of the data. Without the data in front of the face, they could not train proper. So This is very extreme.
It's definitely a problem. Did you have an early vision for this to become a consumer-facing product, or was it going to be just something for you and friends?
Okay, I did on the weekend races, and then you see also the guys there in the national teams. And I was lucky that I know that the German Federation had some guys that were interested what I was doing. And then very at the beginning, I was able to work with the German Federation, the West German Federation on the track. But at the same time, the East German, the GDR, contacted me to help them to work on the 100-kilometer team race on the road. The 100-kilometer, I don't know what is the English name.
Like a team time trial?
Yeah, but for four people.
Okay, yeah, team time trial, I guess.
Yeah, for four. So, and then I was invited in the GDR to do this. And then it was funny at the World Championship. At that time, it was in Japan. They both got beaten by the Russians. Not Russians, sorry, by the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union beat the GDR and the West Germany on the track and on the road. So, but then the year later.
And did you have to convince people of this? Like, was there almost like a little mini marketing campaign? Or
No,
did it convince
coaches knew what they want. They wanted the power. And they were happy to have a device now you can put on the bike and see, and also make a comparison to look at who is the best of these four to go in the team. The same on the track. You have a power meter, you see how economic they are riding. So they understand this really early in the 80s, 88, 89, 90. I think the championship in Japan was 1990. And even I worked in 89 with West Germany. There was the track in Lyon. And I think Chambéry was the road where Greg LeMond got world champion. This was maybe 89. Yes. And then 1991 was the first World Championship. East and West Germany were together to start as one nation in Stuttgart. And they won almost everything. They won the single pursuit. I think they won the team pursuit, everything. And then the other federations saw, okay, they have something on the bike like a power meter. We need this too. And then very early came the USA Cycling. They wanted this because they had the Olympics in Atlanta. So I started working with them. And then also the Italian committee, they were interested too. And then at the same time, some professionals were really interested to make the training better. And one of the first was Greg LeMond. He was always
LeMond was talking to me about it. He really rates it as a pivotal moment in his career.
For new ideas, for new stuff. And then also the other guy was Bjarne Riis. I remember when he came to Team Telecom, he said, I want to win the Tour de France. And they were all laughing about him. And then I gave him the help. I was invited in his house in Luxembourg. Then we went together to Pinarello to get sorted out a time trial bike. We made aerodynamic tests on a velodrome. I think he was the first professional to do aerodynamic tests on a velodrome to optimize his position. Before it was only done at amateurs for the Olympics, like on the velodrome, team pursuit, single pursuit, 100-kilometer time trial where we did aerodynamic testing. But Bjarne was the first one doing aerodynamic tests on a velodrome to optimize his position on the bike.
And did you have to start building out, obviously your background's a medical engineer, not software engineer. Did you have to start building out a team for your vision? Because you've these different use cases now for the SRM where, like you're saying, Risa was using it to analyze and help with his aerodynamic profile. So how did you approach solving those problems?
Now, the aerodynamic profile is easy because you make a relationship between power and speed. The more challenging was to make a robust bike computer, to make a robust power meter, and to write the software. At the start, I tried to make everything myself, but then later I was able to hire people because I was already selling devices like Sporthochschule Cologne. They bought some devices for research. So I could create income. And then working with the federation, you could also get government money or money from the federation to do stuff. So I was able to hire 3-4 people to help to engineer, to develop the parts, to write the software. So I need not to do everything myself. Right now,
how much did the first PowerMeter cost?
I think it was maybe also 6,000 marks, 6,000 German marks.
So what would that have been equivalent?
3,000 euro. I think it was always around this.
Yeah, I remember I paid 2.5 when I bought mine.
Yeah.
It cost more on my bike.
Yeah, but we know power meters people using for more than 10 years. So it's not a throwaway product. And they get a new bike, but put the old power meter on. They get a new bike and put the old power meter on. So,
I lasted 10 years, I'd say, with it.
yeah.
And you used to have to send it back to get the battery changed
Yes, but
and
the
calibrated.
battery was so big to run at a normal guy more than 2 years.
Yeah, I had to
Was more
figure
than
out
a
that
thousand
problem.
hours of use. Was more than 1,000 hours of use.
Yeah,
1,000.
I taught myself how to solder. So then I'd have like all my friends who had SRMs would send their SRMs to my place to solder. And it used to wreck your warranty though. You guys wouldn't warranty it if I soldered it
The
myself.
problem is if you do this later to make it watertight, because every power meter we build, we make a watertight test after building to see if it is watertight. Because this is the biggest challenge, I think, on the most electronics on the bike to make it water resistant. And the next challenge is resistant for the vibration.
So I have you to thank for my mini college business because I was changing power meters, but I was also doing the calibration. So I had two big weights that I'd hang from the pedals and I do the calibration for people as well. It was a great little side business.
Yes, yeah, but better is to put the weight on the chainring and not on the crank and fix.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I can explain, but let's say if you put the load on the crank is holded then on 2 points by the chainring, but also has a friction in the BB. So you add the friction of the BB, the static friction. But if you put the weight on the chainring, the force goes direct in the power meter and it doesn't matter what the friction of the BB is. So it's the better calibration point is the chainring.
Interesting.
So we
it's
do
calibrating
calibrate
everyone's
all.
parameters wrong.
There could be a slight difference, but the difference depends on the quality of the bearing. But it's static, so it's better to put on the chainring.
Did you have any pushback from, let's call them traditionalists? Because cycling is a very traditional sport, especially mainland Europe countries like Italy, France.
Yeah, but
still traditional.
But I have to say, when I started, the older cyclists were interested. Also, let's say Gianni Bugno used it, Maurizio Fondriest, and they were also at that time already older, and they were understand why. And Piane was old, was the end of, and Greg LeMond. They were older in the years when they were, and I think some young guys were more skeptical. And now it's different, yes. Now it's different. But at that time, more the problem were the older coach. Like the old coach, you don't need this, you don't need this. And I think sometimes maybe they're right. Right now, everyone is too much focused on the bike computer. They look more on the bike computer than on the road. They have in the navigation and then they do a descent and maybe in the race the course is a little different. I think it's the more safe is still if you look on the road and see what happens there.
Yeah, I think
and then adjust, because I would say in the last 2-3 years, I have seen more crashes than ever. I cannot even remember when I look back and watch the tour, and I remember at Indurain and at that time how many times he has crashed. But now even the stars, they crash.
Yeah.
The best, look at Wout van Aert, how many times a year he is on the deck. Or the team from Ineos, like all. And why?
I think there's definitely, it's a complicated one to unpack. It's like, for me, the Patreon or the peloton, the traditional hierarchy, the kind of dissolution and people not respecting that anymore is a big problem. Like even one generation ago, like 10 years ago, like Cancellara and Boone in the peloton, people weren't jostling them for position, like they were listening to their direction. But now you have neo pros coming in, like trying to move up on the grass in the Tour of Flanders and then cutting back in and wiping half the peloton out. I had Daryl Impey on the podcasts, and he was saying he's seen a neo pro moving up on the grass in a classic, and he said he wasn't being an arsehole to the kid, but he tipped him on the hip and he said, hey, that could have went really wrong and you could have hurt a lot of people there. And he said back in his day, if he had said that to a senior rider, he would have just said, oh, amazing, thanks for the feedback, sorry about that, and being real apologetic. He said the young kid is telling him to fuck off.
No.
So
Yeah,
for me, that's a big one. It's the
also
lack of respect.
let's say if they do the descents, a lot of crashes also happen now in the fast descents. Like you watch Tour of Spain, and I think also probably what I think is when you do a fast descent and you have the super strong brakes on the bike and you make a little too much braking, let's say on the rear wheel, you're immediately on the deck, even when it's wet.
I feel like you're a little torn about your, like, I know, I can sense you're very proud of the SRM, but I can also sense that you're a real cycling traditionalist and you're torn whether it's been 100% positive.
No. Okay, to measure the power is one thing and record this. But now you want to measure 10 other things. So you get an overload of maybe information, what really takes away the focus what cycling is. I think it would be possible to measure easy lactate permanently, blood sugar permanently, and all these things. You would record 20 things at the same time.
Yeah.
And then at one point, this is maybe getting too much.
They banned the continuous glucose monitors last year, the UCI, for measuring blood sugar.
Maybe at one point you put the sensor in the body and then you cannot see from outside.
You think they should ban power meters?
This is why we made power meters with a record in the Spider, where you don't need a head unit. We made then the PM9 because I was one time at a meeting with the UCI several years ago, and they were thinking to ban the power meter. Not the power meter, to ban the bike computer,
the head unit,
take away the focus on the road.
Yeah, like we see on the track, where it's like if you use it, you're putting it behind your saddle or whatever.
Yeah. And then I think the cyclocross was not allowed to, and then whatever. So we made a power meter, then record the heart rate, speed, power in the power meter, and after the race you could download. So you need not a head unit.
You think that's a good move?
Okay, but then at the end also you can have a watch where you see the data. So you must spend then a watch too. So if you have a fitness watch from Garmin or whatever, can show the data too. So you must spend this too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know Nibali towards the end of his career was quite outspoken and saying he doesn't.
The one thing is to record the data and have the data for later analyzing to see, okay, this is the one thing. But to have this removed from the bike as a sort of a distraction, that's the other thing. These are two different things. And then
I think most of us agree that the parameter recording ability and post-race analysis of the data is a good thing.
Let's say you don't have on the head, then are you allowed to have at least a device on the bike that tells you the distance, or also nothing? You have no bike computer, not at all, and then still you look on the motorcycle passing on the side of the road, holding this. Okay, now the climb starts in 5 kilometers. Or you see the marks on the side of the road, how it was 30 years ago. All the informations were on the side of the road. But then also the next thing is, will you allow the headphones that they can talk? Or should this be banned too? Because also by talking, you can get information, maybe not of your power, but of other things. And so ban everything. So that if you want something to know, you have to go back, go to the car of the sports director, listen what he says and get forward, but this could be danger too. So I do not know. But I think the bike industry and even the ones who make the bike computer will fight against the computers get banned.
Yeah.
But still they can sell it for the training. But maybe it would be nice to see a bike race where no one has a computer, where no one has nothing, and it's like it was 50 years ago. It would be maybe interesting only to select one race where it's like this to see how it goes. Then the teams even has work stronger together because the guys from each team and to the others need to talk to each other what goes on. You know, right now they talk mainly with the director in the car.
How do you think about how cycling would have evolved if it wasn't for parameters?
I think if I would have not done it, someone else would have done it. I think right now a power meter would exist. I'm not sure, but I think someone else would have made it. I don't know.
And It seems like a lot of people, like I don't know the engineering landscape of it, but it seems like a lot of people piggybacked on your work. So we had SRM for a long time, and then
Yeah,
I might miss some people, but then the next one I became aware of was Power Tap, and I had the rear wheel.
yeah.
And then I don't know what happened. Around 2016, 2017, we seen just explosion of brands from Quark to Quack to 4II to.
I had a patent for the power meter and the spider. So for 20 years, this was the only spot where I can do. But I got the patent in 88. So it 80, no, I got the patent. Yeah, I think 88. So 2008, this was free for everyone. But I think maybe we made also in the past the power meters for SRM till they make their own power meter and called it Quark. So, but now you have, I think, 5, 6 spider companies on the world. There are 2 or 3 in China. Then you have the Quark. Then you have, I think, also the Spanish company Roadman makes something like a spider. Then a lot.
Yeah.
And then pedals too. You have 3 or 4 companies that make pedals, even maybe 5. And then you have the companies, they make the power meter on the crank like Stages. I think Stages was the first one to make a popular power meter on the crank.
Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than Huel. Huel has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. Huel is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. Huel Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like tapioca, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part, it's the flavors. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavors. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get Huel directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the Huel website, huel.com/Roadman. And you know, Stage has done a good job because they almost democratized the power meter a little bit because it became affordable. The problem with it was, like, it didn't work for very long. Like, you could get a couple of months out of it and you had to send it back, but they had good customer service, so it wasn't a huge problem. But it definitely brought the barrier. It definitely brought power meters from a tool that only super elite people use to now, if you go to a Cat 4 club league, everyone has a power meter.
Yeah. Okay, but you see, if you buy a good power meter and you know this power meter works for the next 5 years, it's an investment. It's like you buy a good tool. You can buy a cheap tool and a cheap power meter and buy every year a new one. But then by the time of 5 years, this costs you more than to buy right away a good device.
Was it durable from the outset? And kind of as a follow-up to that, how much did having riders like Greg LeMond as early adopters of this, how much feedback did they give you to change the product?
Mainly from the cyclists, I do not get much feedback. They more or less, they use what I give them and they are happy. The most feedback or the most development we do ourselves and see what needs to be done. Okay, I know cyclists, they are really giving feedback and telling me, okay, this and this need to be better. But at the end, they took what I gave them and only what I adapted is all the cranks. I was happy at one point that Shimano made cranks for me that I can give to the pro teams and I need not to manipulate an existing Shimano crank. So Shimano made cranks. This was a time where 80% of the peloton had SRM on the bike, and then also Campagnolo made cranks for SRM. We made power meters for Cannondale. We made power meters for Druvativ or SRAM. So we made for all type of crank systems a power meter, but the power meter inside was more or less all the same. Only the interface changed to the crank and to the chain rings. Because Campagnola has a different chaining size than Shimano. Then on the mountain bike you have others, and Velodrome you have other chain rings. So the only in and outside changed. So inside connection to the axle and the crank, and outside to the chain rings. But the power meter itself was the same. The big change came when everything went wireless. Our old power meter has a little sensor on the frame that received the data from the power meter with a very high data rate. It was 1000 signals per second at the start, where the power meter sends data to the frame. Then later, everyone wants wireless. Like then you have to do something with ANT and then now Bluetooth. But that means at that time you send only 1 time per second ready calculated power. And this makes a problem that the zero offset is not that easy to control. When you go back at our old power meters, the zero offset was controlled by the head unit and always readjusted. Now the power meter has inside a temperature compensation and somehow needs to find its zero offset alone. But better would be if the head unit on the bike could control this. But right now this is not possible, because then you have to work with all bike computer manufacturers to integrate this in the power meter, and this is not working.
Was it a big engineering challenge moving away from the cable? I know for me, the cable was super reliable. I never had a problem with it. The challenge was I'd swap from my road bike for racing to my training bike to my time trial bike. So I'd have like a Shimano Octalink bottom bracket on all of them, but I'd be like 11, 12 o'clock at night changing cranks over from one bike to the other and trying to bring a wire across from one to the other. And it was labor intensive.
Yeah. Or you need 2 power meters.
Yeah, I hadn't got enough money.
Or buy a used one or whatever. No, okay, the cable has an advantage. First, it needs less energy. It needed almost no energy to send. Now having Bluetooth running and all this takes more energy. So the battery time is shorter. Okay, now our new power meters, they are all rechargeable. They run 100 hours fully recharged, so it's easier. And it's the same charging plug at the power control, so you need only to carry one.
When did you start looking at this from, I guess if we call you in the early days, you're an artist, you're figuring out and you're working on your craft. When did you have to become an entrepreneur and start thinking about, I need to scale this company and build systems for distribution, quality assurance, customer service, all this?
It grew slowly from along, I have to say. I had in the start, let's say, as an example is the USA. I had distributors there, people who had to sell, or also in Australia. But if you have a distributor, the problem is they only want to get the big margin selling a new product, but none of them really wanted to invest in a service. Because on the service, you cannot make that much money. You have to hire someone with good skills to open a power meter, change a battery, make a calibration close, what is probably a time, let's say, of 2 hours, maybe more, with the handling, the shipping, and then you cannot charge much. You say, okay, it's 80 euro, 100 euro to change a battery, but a guy is maybe get this full done, maybe 2-3 hours, including the shipping process. And then no one really wants to invest into this. So at one point I had to say, okay, I have to go myself to the USA to do this, to stay there alive. This was a big investment to start an office in the USA. We are still there, we are in Colorado. I was happy to work close with USA Cycling, and still we work with them, and they are also based in Colorado. So this was a good start, and I think we have this now 20 years too. But we have not this in all other countries. And I think probably to sell well, you need in each country at least a person designated only to this product and represents this product. Let's say in Spain and France and England, that not everyone has to contact the main office in Germany. But this is probably not to have in every country a service office. They can do this. The quantity is not enough to afford this, and I think the other companies don't have this too. I think SRM has not in every country a place where they can service a power meter, because they say, okay, throw it away and you get a new one. The same probably with stages, because if you do this, what do they do when they have a lot of returns? They will not repair. They put in the trash and send a new one, because to repair is too expensive, I would say.
When you look at the emergence of AI now, does that offer potential for a next frontier with how we can use power meter data, or are we nearing the limits of what can be extracted from the data?
Okay, nice would be, let's say, if the bike computer and the bike would know already at the start of the training day what would be at this day the best for you. But for this, it needs a lot of information. And this is maybe better to handle outside with a software with artificial intelligence that can do this, that it's fed with maybe 20 body parameters. Like what the fitness watches already do. How good was your sleep? How long was your sleep? What is your body weight? What is your body temperature? What is your heart pressure? What is your heart rate rest? What all these things. And then knowing what was the body load before, and then to make a day by day based training, and not follow a strict training plan that was created for the next 2 weeks, and see, okay, it's easier, let's say, if a coach is present, like you have a team training camp with 10 guys and the coach is there every day, sees you, looks in your eyes and see, okay, maybe you should today have a rest day because it gets too much, or you do only the half, and then we see tomorrow. But also a lot of guys, maybe not the top pros, that follow strictly a training plan, and at some point they don't see it is maybe too much, because they ship the data to the coach. The coach is 500 kilometers away and looks only at the data, but does not see the person directly behind. And sometimes you need to look in someone's eyes to see, okay, he is really tired. Or just, he had a stress with his wife or with his kids or whatever. It's maybe good he has today an easy day, not to make too much load on him. But this only works when you're closer to a coach. But in cycling now, you have a lot of external coaches that are sitting somewhere and get the data.
Roadman, I've got something exciting to share with you. It's been making a huge difference in my performance of late, especially when it comes to my sleep. Allow me to introduce you to Pillar. We're probably all familiar with the importance of electrolytes and carbohydrates in our race preparation. Pillar is taking a slightly different route. It's focusing on something called micronutrition, ensuring you're ready to perform even before you ever hit the start line. It's all about promoting a good night's sleep, facilitating effective recovery, and replenishing those crucial micronutrients so you can perform your best. Over the past month, I've been running a little experiment. I've been incorporating Pillar's triple magnesium supplement into my routine. I take it 30 minutes before bed every night, and I've seen a remarkable improvement in my sleep quality and my HRV. I'm tracking this every single night using my Whoop, and the results are there in black and white. I wake up feeling refreshed, having had a deep restorative sleep, and I'm ready to take on work, take on training, or whatever life throws at me the next day. But I want you to do something. Don't take my word for this. Let the data from your fitness tracker tell you the story. If you're ready to elevate your performance and elevate your sleep quality like me, why not give Pillar a try? Head on over to pillarperformance.shop and use the code ROADMAN on your local website to get 15% off your first order. If you're listening in the US, you can head on over to thefeed.com/pillar and use the code ROADMAN for the same 15% off your first order. I think Training Peaks really made that possible. So like a combination of, your work pioneering the Power Meter, and then Dirk Friel and the guys over at Training Peaks to give that cloud-based ability. It seems like 99% of all cyclists that have a Power Meter now use Training Peaks.
Yeah, no, I know when I started in 88, 89, there was no email. So I was with the team. I printed out this on a black and white printer, made the curves colorful, put in an envelope, and sent by mail to the coach.
Joe Friel was telling me the same.
You had no cell phone.
Yeah.
Cell phones get popular in 92, 93. 1988, 1987, no one had a cell phone. And no one, you had no email. You can go and speak on the phone. You can maybe send a black and white fax, but then you don't see the color. No one had a color monitor on the computer. It was, you have to send the data by mail, by envelope. And now you can send by email. This is a big challenge to 20 years ago. But people do not realize this, how quick they can have access to the data. But they don't see the person.
But even the evolution of that, Yuli, like it went from you're sending it by mail, but it still wasn't that, like when I was around and starting to use it, it still wasn't that user friendly because you had to download the SRM into, I think it was WKO Plus or the SRM software, and I'd have to get those files, download them, attach them to an email and send them to my coach.
Yeah.
And then he would import them on his end.
Yeah. Okay, now the PC9 can put it right away as an email, can send as an email. And what we do with the PC9 too can send, or the Garmin right away when you're finished at home, it sends to your phone, and then from your phone you can do what you want. Upload it right away to Strava or whatever. But this was not, even not 10 years ago, this was possible. 10 years ago, no one had a fitness watch.
Do you feel disappointed that you'd such a head start in the hardware game and you guys are still pretty much market leader in hardware? Software, it seems like Training Peaks won the race.
I don't know. We have still our software, I think some coaches use to analyze deeper because it's a very precise tool. And yeah, but I think also a lot of guys simply uploaded it on Strava, basta, and see how it was and do not much more. And then still on Strava also you can see a nice diagram, what you have done, the intensity and things like this, basic for everyone to understand. But for deeper understanding, you're right, you need Training Peaks or you need to sit down and look at the raw data like with the SRM software or with Golden Cheetah or with something else.
Looking back on the journey, what are you most proud about?
I'm proud that we're still alive and make our product because I see a lot of companies going and we are still making power meters a lot. And that's good.
You obviously
we develop a PC9 too, and we have an indoor trainer, we have an ergometer and other stuff. We make power meters for ships too, with America's Cup. They had in the past the power meter and for the grinders and the, what is the pile where they're putting on the piston on the ship, where the grinders.
Oh yeah.
Pedestal, on the pedestal. And then we have power meters for wheelchairs, and we made a power meter for the space station Mir for the Russian cosmonauts. So there's a lot of things we did.
If somebody's listening to the podcast and they have a hardware technical idea like this that they're working on, what advice would you give them?
Don't give up and don't try to make everything right away 100% perfect. Be happy for the start with 80-90% and then finish the product and then make later go the next step, because if you want something 100%, you will never get finished, because doing this every month you get a new idea and want to make it better and better, and so we will never end. So be first happy with something that's good but not perfect, and then make the next step and try to do something better and better, but not try right away at the first shot to make a perfect device. This is not possible, and you get lost in the details and will never finish.
Yuli, thank you for your work. Thank you for joining me today. It's so wild and interesting to me that the tracks of your life intersect with almost every cyclist in the world now. They'd be living a different day and they'd have a slightly different training flow and workflow if it wasn't for your amazing innovation. So thank you very much.
Thank you and have a good day. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. Click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.